Well, Dr. Nicholson, do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience tonight?
Well, I'd like to remind people that it's not to please our veterans that have these illnesses. Please don't be afraid of them. These veterans need help, and they need help as soon as possible. The sooner we get a handle on these chronic diseases, and of course because of the chemical poisoning as well, and get these people well, then we won't have a problem with our population anymore. If we turn our backs on these people, if we allow these chronic illnesses, for example, to take hold, they'll take hold in the population, and it will take a long time to get rid of them. We're seeing an alarming rate of increase of these chronic illnesses in the population, and this could be one of the reasons.
Okay, Dr. Nicholson, we have a question for you from Sergeant Rick Rogers in the Ready Reserve, that's a veteran of the Gulf War, and we're trying to get a microphone to him right now so he can ask that to you. He's here in our studio audience.
Yeah, Dr. Nicholson, we have 2 Gulf War veterans here that are suffering from the disease, and I know that a lot of people would like to have an opportunity to ask you questions, and Rick, go right ahead.
Well, Doctor, I'm having almost the same symptoms as Joyce talked about, like muscle. Last night I woke up screaming with my muscles hurting me. I have my memory, I don't remember things, and sometimes I get lost, and I have almost everything that she talked about. When I come home, I forgot how to start my car. I dug in the dirt for about a month, just digging and rubbing it all over me. I don't know what that symbolized or what I was trying to do there, but at San Antonio base there, when we got back, I just kept rubbing mud all over my body. And then I couldn't find my way around, and I couldn't figure out how to start my car. I couldn't start my motorcycle. Now, all my joints are going. I've already had 2 operations on my knees. My esophagus replaced, they rebuilt it. The tumor's removed. I've lost most of the use of my left hand. I had a big tumor removed from my wrist. Already a tumor removed from between my legs, and I've had pneumonia 12 times and several kidney infections, and I aspirated twice at Helena Hospital there, which they brought me back to life. My lungs filled up with fluid and blood, and they had to use the paddles on me. But I was very healthy, and I ran a mile and a half under 7 minutes before I left for over there, and the muscle pain, like Joyce described, is unbearable. I scream at night, and I wake up, and I can't get up out of bed by myself no more. The wife helps me up in the mornings, and that's just some of my problems.
Dr. Nicholson, do you have any response to maybe what you've seen in the past similar to that?
Well, we've had a lot of patients that have many of these same signs and symptoms. What you're saying, unfortunately, is not unusual. The only thing I can say is that you need to be tested. You need to have your blood tested as soon as possible to see if you're positive for these agents. And if you are positive, I think you need to have extensive antibiotic therapy. When it gets to this stage, you may actually have to go on intravenous therapy for a while. And this becomes a problem because you really have to be under direct care of a physician to undergo that intravenous therapy. But usually when you have an illness, if it's a chronic infection and it's really taken hold like this, it requires a lot to get rid of it.
Okay. I also had lockjaw just last year. I had lockjaw, which resulted in very serious cellulitis attack, and almost died from that. That was at St. Pat's Hospital over here. My blood, every time they test it, my sodium level is down now, and most of the time they have to keep me in the hospital. And most of this year I've been in the hospital with my blood up and down, different things like that just happening to me all the time, and mostly muscle problem. I mean, I can't hardly walk. I don't imagine it'll be another 6 months and I won't be able to walk. I'll be in a wheelchair.
Well, one question that I have, were your signs and symptoms fairly immediate after returning from the Gulf, or were they very slow in terms of their appearance and in terms of their intensity?
No, they resulted right away, especially I had very high amount of fatigue, and I had a high paranoia. I was frightened all the time and scared to be around people, and whether it was fear to give them something or something else, I don't know, but this went on right away, and right away my joints started right away in my muscles. I started getting muscle pain right
Let
away.
me ask the question again. In theater, did you have any of these signs and symptoms in theater? And when did you leave the Gulf?
I left December 13th, Friday the 13th, December 91. And no,
okay, you were there during the Desert Storm, presumably.
I had no symptoms other than things that was going on over there didn't seem normal to me. Like the people, they seemed awful paranoid, and they acted strange to me.
You know, Dr. Nicholson, let me interrupt right here. What he's talking about are things that you've heard about many times, I'm sure. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
We're talking about muscle spasms. The VA's seen this a million times. They know this is happening. The memory loss, they know that's happening. They can almost make a picture, a clinical picture of a Gulf War veteran now, but yet they're not treating them. One thing I want to bring up is what he just mentioned about the paranoia, the startle reaction, the irritability is right now, and I hate to alarm people, but I think this needs to be addressed. We're seeing numbers of Gulf War veterans that are now having very severe violent reactions in which they commit violent crimes. And I'm concerned about the fact that they've been placed on Prozac, placed on Halcyon, told they're, a head case and just get a life, and now they're committing violent crimes. And these guys, many of them, were choir boys prior to the Gulf War. They'd never so much as spit on the sidewalk. Are you seeing this kind of situation?
Well, I've been contacted actually several times within the last 6 months by lawyers who have clients who are in prison because of violent crimes, and they want to find out about this because their clients are sick, and when their clients were sick and committed crimes, they had no memory of those crimes in some cases. And so, yes, there is a concern about this, and we're seeing it. That's true. We're seeing these problems, and it is making an impact, more or less.
One thing that concerns me also is that, now I know Rick that was just speaking was in a military police unit, is that a lot of these guys that served in MP units have now come back to the States, are serving in the military, are serving in the civilian police. They're law enforcement people who now carry a gun. And many of them have told me they don't dare go to the VA because if they get a diagnosis of a psychiatric disorder, they're going to be labeled as a head case and they won't be able to carry a gun. So it's going to be their whole livelihood that will be at stake.
You're exactly right. If they're diagnosed with any psychiatric illness, then they will be decommissioned as a peace officer. That's almost an automatic. And consequently, many of these individuals do not come forward, do not admit their illness. In fact, we've run into a few. And in fact, we were helping members of the police force when we were in Houston, one of which was actually a former member of the Houston Police Department who became paralyzed. And we were, helping them. She did recover on antibiotic therapy. So we have seen this, and it is a major problem.
Well, I just thank you for what you're doing, and I hope that you continue to do it. And I know that everyone will. You need everyone's support in doing this also, because this is a real problem. Because I know Dr. Nicholson is now doing this out of his own pocket, and has been treating Gulf War veterans for the last 3 years, 4 years out of his own pocket. So we need to provide the sources of funding outside the government, because not $1, to my knowledge anyway, has gone outside the DOD to anything that is really going to be effective. Since there is no illness, and they don't want to treat an illness that doesn't exist, we're going to be stonewalled for quite a while.
Well, hopefully things will change, but I wouldn't expect them to change, as soon as we need for many of the people who are sick. I was on the telephone this evening with Randy Hebert and his wife, and I think for those of you that have watched C-SPAN in the last couple of days, you couldn't help but to notice Major Hebert from the Marine Corps giving testimony to Shay's subcommittee on intergovernmental affairs. Those of you that, let me just give you a little test here. Do you remember the Marine who couldn't speak any longer, had been diagnosed with ALS, and his wife had to speak for him? This was the individual that we were discussing possible diagnosis and therapy with just this afternoon, and I did receive his complete medical records, and we've been going over these right now. So we have been seeing an alarming increase in these autoimmune-like disorders, ALS, MS, lupus-like diseases, and so on. And these are not by chance or accident. These are being caused by the chemical and biological insults that the body has received, and we need to do something about this, and we need to do it now, because these individuals can't hold out till Congress makes up its mind, till DOD makes up its mind, and the VA does something.
Dr. Nicholson, some time ago on the news they talked about people that had a so-called AIDS gene, that if they had 2 pairs of this, they couldn't get the virus. If they had 1 pair, they would get HIV but wouldn't get the symptoms. I was wondering, is there some sort of some people that have a natural defense to this type of biological mycoplasm? And also, if people don't get treatment, to what percentage of the population in America could it actually spread through?
Well, unfortunately, these types of chronic illnesses like the mycoplasma, or even brucella for that matter, brucella is less of a problem because it's less contagious than the mycoplasma. The mycoplasma is contagious and will spread to individuals, and unfortunately, it does not stimulate a strong immune response, which means that it can hide much more readily inside your body. And also because it carries this one HIV-1 gene that encodes an envelope protein, glycoprotein, that sits on the surface of the mycoplasma. This will allow it to bind to certain lymphocytes, like the CD4 lymphocytes, which are part of your immune response system, and eventually can enter those cells and interfere with the metabolism of those cells and perhaps even kill them. This means that it could be responsible for suppressing one's immune system. And if this happens, then this leaves you wide open for a variety of different contagious illnesses. And this is what we think has happened to some of the veterans when they just absolutely fall apart, and they just have every possible illness that you could ever imagine. It's almost a situation like AIDS, but it's really not AIDS. And this is a horrible situation that's extremely difficult to fight.
What's the degree that if it goes untreated in individuals, that it could spread through the main population? Well,
we're just not sure about that. Again, I told you that it seems that prolonged exposure seems to be required, and there's a very long latency. This makes it extremely difficult to study in any kind of a controlled setting, or you really need a controlled setting, I should say, to study this type of phenomena, because it really doesn't tell us too much about its ability to spread in the population. I personally think it's spreading very slowly in the population, and there is a downside to this. Because it's spreading very slowly, nobody really cares. Nobody notices it, nobody really cares until it creeps up on you, and it's almost too late. So in a way, this is more insidious than something that rapidly is transferred and is rapidly fatal, like Ebola virus or something like this, because people, they recognize the signs and symptoms of hemorrhagic fever almost immediately. Those people are isolated and kept away, and then it becomes a problem that is limiting, self-limiting almost. But these types of illnesses are not so apparent. They have a very long onset. It's hard to detect them. They slowly spread, and then you get to a situation where all of a sudden everybody's chronically ill, and you didn't notice it so much before, but you look around and everybody seems to be sicker than they were a few years ago or whatever. And we've seen communities, for example, we're working with 2 communities in Northern California that are absolutely riddled with these chronic fatigue-like illnesses. And one of these groups we're working with in Shasta County in Northern California, people are starting to recover now for the first time in over 10 years from these sorts of chronic illnesses with the appropriate antibiotic therapy. So hopefully we can make a dent on these before it becomes a major public health problem.
Dr. Nicholson, could you restate your address again for us before we say farewell?
Yes, if anyone needs information, we send it out free. They can write to me, Garth Nicholson, at the Institute for Molecular Medicine. That's P.O. Box 52470, Irvine, California, 92619. And we'd be glad to send you out an information package containing a lot of materials and information and so on.
Oh, well, Dr. Nicholson, thank you very much. We know you're very busy, and I guess you're looking at that report of that man that was on television tonight also. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with all of us here in Missoula tonight.
Well, I'd like to, again, thank Joyce Riley for what she's doing. I tell you, she is one of my heroes. She's doing a Herculean job at trying to get the information out and to try and help as many people as possible. And God bless you, Joyce.
Well, thank you. The same to you and Nancy. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholson.
Okay, well, let's take our question. Now, you're welcome to ask anybody here in the room anything that you'd like. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
I called Joyce probably about a week and a half ago down in Texas. My name is Laura, and my husband was the Persian Gulf vet.
Yes, Laura.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I just want to clarify a couple things. Kendall couldn't be with me tonight to call you or to come to the studio or anything like that. He was hospitalized in the West LA hospital, the VA center, yesterday morning. And so he wasn't going to be here, but he's having me tape this program and everything for you. Dr. Baumschwager he has been let go from the West LA hospital. He is being allowed to practice under a limited contract at the VA walk-in clinic in Los Angeles, but that contract is ending at the end of the year. And my husband has been trying to see him for probably the last 90 days, trying to get down there. And we've just had tremendous bureaucratic red tape from the VA. And so how some of the people in the VA system that are kind of working against the grain were able to get him down there was they put him in for a Persian Gulf II exam, sent him down to the hospital, and then basically they're going to give him some of the guys down at the hospital are going to give him a pass, give him a van, and get him over to the clinic to see Dr. Baumschwager. They also have a vet out of Denver, Colorado that they're going to do the same thing for. But, my husband was an MP. He went over there. He did his duty. And, I mean, we've been just so totally lied to by the VA from the very beginning. He currently, all he draws is a 10% disability rating, neurological infection. And for the last 5.5 years, I'll bet he's been able to work 12 months out of that. It's completely financially devastated our family. I've gotten sick. My children are sick. I mean, not really bad. The children and I have been pretty fortunate. But, I mean, my husband has basically completely deteriorated. They've diagnosed him with Persian Gulf syndrome. They diagnosed him with Reiter's syndrome, ankylosing spondylitis, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, reflux disease, and they said there's obviously an element of depression in there. They're not saying he's a head case, but they said anybody who's been chronically ill for 5.5 years with no hope of any of the medications working. At one point, they had him on a series of medications, and he was probably taking no less than 60 pills a day.
Oh, that's incredible. You know, Laura, I want everyone to hear what your story is, because your story is what's really happening right now. Your husband has a disease, he has not been able to work, and he has 10% disability. You know, and this is not an issue over compensation here, but I will say that 95% of all the troops have been turned down for any type of compensation from the Gulf War, 95%. But right now, we are looking at our troops being told there's nothing wrong with you, or gee, we can't find out what the cause is, or giving them all these pills. They're not getting any better. They can't work. They're financially bankrupt. And now, I think you said you're having the problems. Is that correct?
I've just had like a lot of health problems, a lot of fatigue, my immune system. I catch everything. Like right now, I've had a cold for 6 solid weeks. I can't seem to get rid of it, and that's real common. We constantly have bouts of diarrhea in the house. All of the kids and I have rashes occasionally. We don't seem to have any of the musculoskeletal symptoms or the pain or the memory lapses or anything like that. We've gone to, in our household, because my husband has become so chemically sensitive to everything, everything in our house has been switched over to like non-caustic, environmentally safe. I can't really explain most of them, but we've changed everything in our house over to different things like that. We eat very differently than we used to eat. And he's still, even though they have tried, I will say this about the VA hospital at Fort Harrison for us. They have really, really tried to help him, and they don't have a clue.
Well,
They're so far out of their element, they simply do not have a clue.
Now, Fort Harrison did request a copy of tonight's program to put in their library. So they will be getting that down there at the fort. That was some good news we heard from up there. I had a question, I guess it's for you, Joyce, or our caller, that what can they do to just get a blood test and a screening now before it gets too advanced? Can that just be done here locally, that anybody can withdraw blood locally and have it mailed to Dr. Nicholson in California, and then get a prescription for an antibiotic that can be taken to a drugstore here in town, so there isn't a lot of traveling around the country?
right. What we recommend is that they get their blood tested if they can afford it. Now, here's the problem, is it's $150 to get blood tested. Dr. Nicholson used to be doing it free of charge, but he was stopped from doing that at MD Anderson Cancer Center. So now it's Immunosciences Lab in California that's doing it, and that's $150 for the Gulf War veterans. We're trying to figure a way to help them with the cost on this. But you might want to consider getting the blood test. The doxycycline, if anyone has any problems paying for the doxycycline, we will pay for that. As long as somebody can get their prescription written by their physician and show us that they have the prescription, we will provide the money to pay for the doxycycline. And the reason I say this is because too many Gulf War veterans have been going to animal feed stores and getting the doxycycline. They've been going to animal feed stores like cattle feed stores and to fish food stores to get the antibiotics, and that needs to stop. But Laura, my heart goes out to you because you're right in the middle of this mess right now. You didn't ask for this. And for the people out there who don't understand what have happened to your lives, tell them what your life is now compared to what it was like before the Gulf War.
My husband and I are both college graduates. I was working on my master's when he left. Luckily, we had our children. We had 2 small children right before he went, and so we didn't have an issue of our children having any, birth defects because they were born before he went. But I mean, our plans when he returned were he was looking at a PhD program at Stanford University. Stanford was very interested in him, and I mean, you come home and these weren't just pipe dreams of us; these were very realistic choices and plans we were making in our lives. And it's just kind of been this big, huge emotional roller coaster for 5.5 years where everything is out of control. You have no answers. You don't know what to do. And you have no future, in a worldly perspective of what's going to be next. I mean, there were many times without the generosity of family members and friends and even people who didn't even know us. We didn't even know where the next meal was coming, and I think you learn a lot of really, really positive things when you basically lose everything. You lose your house, you lose your car, your savings, your investments, your medical insurance. You see your husband dying before your eyes, and it really helps you to put in perspective what is important and what is not important. And I can honestly say that the only thing that has really sustained us in all of this is our Christian beliefs. Because
Well-
without that, I think we would have been totally lost. I mean, the catastrophic pain that you have experienced and others have experienced, I've seen him go through. My husband probably averages, because of all the complications in his health, if he's able to sleep at all, he usually drops from exhaustion. And because of this intense pain, and he's been on major painkillers, he's maybe able to sleep maybe 2.5 hours at a shot. I can't imagine the amount of sleep deprivation a body has after, basically that's happened like for the last 2.5 years. I don't know how a body can even continue to bounce back and make it through another day. I don't know how his body keeps on going through all of this.
Well, you're so right about that. You know, I talked to many Gulf War veterans that sleep, the max they can sleep a night is 1 hour and 15 minutes. I don't know how their bodies continue. But I'll tell you this, their drive is so strong. Because just like with the airborne, just like with special forces, you know, they were taught to deny pain, not to create it, not to imagine it, not to fabricate it. These are some of the finest people in this country, finest people that we had, the young men that were the most physically fit. We've sent them over there, and to anyone who would even question whether or not there's a Gulf War illness, listening to your story, it's just so compelling.
Well, we've had some very key people that have just done a tremendous amount for us. And Senator Baucus's office, I mean, we went to them in September of this year. Finally, we just, you know, after 5.5 years, people think you should have had a lot sooner than that, you know. But we finally had it, and we went in and we saw someone in his office, and her name is Angela. And, I mean, they basically were able to get him on full incapacitation pay because he's still in the Army Reserve. They got him on full incapacitation pay. We've seen more money in the last 45 days than we've seen in the last 5 years roll through his checking account from the Department of Defense. And he just got extended this afternoon for another 6 months of full incapacitation pay. He's getting more medical treatment in the last 90 days since we went there than we probably have had the benefit of in 5.5 years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I mean, his office has really done a lot. So if anybody in, you know, Montana, because there aren't that many vets here. Now, people don't understand that, but per capita in the big picture, we don't mean a whole lot in the United States. You kind of get lost in the wash, but, you know, there are some people that will go to bat for you and will call people in Washington, D.C. and make the wheels move. Doesn't mean that's all the answers, but at least it's a start of something for you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that someone is doing something in this area. I wish they would do something on a national scale to tell the truth, and the Pentagon to come forward and tell the truth. My heart goes out to you again, and I thank you so much for calling, and I wish you all the very best.
Okay, well, I will see you tomorrow night.
Wonderful. I want to meet you. Thank you
Okay,
so
thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's amazing. Here they say they've lost all of these records. This is an article that we have from the New York Times, Joyce. We just got it 12/6/96. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but you can keep that. The VA has been accused of purging doctors who question Gulf illness stance in Washington. The lawmaker who has led the congressional investigation of the Persian Gulf War illnesses has accused the Department of Veterans Affairs Friday of an effort to purge the agency of physicians who publicly question the government's stand on the issue. The lawmaker, Representative Christopher Shays, Republican of Connecticut, was responding to reports this week that 2 VA doctors had been targeted for dismissal because they were outspoken in the view that some veterans of the 1991 Persian Gulf War had been made sick by exposure to Iraqi chemical weapons or by an infectious agent endemic to the Gulf. So here, if the doctors that the VA originally hired to take care of our people start speaking out in favor of this, the New York Times, which is a credible piece of journalism, tells us they're purging them. So maybe you wanted to comment on this and tell us something about what Schwarzkopf's up to and other things.
Well, let me give you some background on this situation right here. Is Dr. Baumschwag of the VA in LA is being targeted right now. He is a neurologist and he is a psychiatrist. Now, Dr. Baumschwag had the audacity to come out and say, we have done neurological tests on these guys and they have a real problem. It's not a mental disorder. He tested them doing many different types of neurological tests and has found out that they have a memory loss, they have concentration loss, they have some optic nerve problems, they have problems related to the neurological system. He came forward with this information and he testified before Christopher Shays and was terminated. He went on the air in Spokane, Washington on KREM 2 TV. Now, Tom Grant of KREM 2 TV in Spokane deserves a tremendous amount of credit because Tom Grant is the first journalist in the major news to bring forward the story of the Gulf War illness. He told the truth. It's communicable. They're dying. And he had Dr. Baumschwag on. Dr. Baumschwag, the week after he was on that program, was terminated.
These were the heroes of Desert Storm. 700,000 Americans rolling across the Persian Gulf. They were Army Rangers like Jeffrey Hutchison, slipping behind enemy lines to set the laser sights for all those smart bombs. They were sailors like Tony Wilner, boarding Iraqi ships and firing tomahawks. They were Marines like David Smith, sweeping into Kuwait City. But today, some 70 to 100,000 of those veterans are sick.
Just so physically drained, and I have no idea why.
Many, like Hutchison, Wilner, and Smith, are deathly ill.
It's inflammatory, but I consider this murder.
And saddest of all, many of their wives, their children, their friends, and even healthcare workers seem to be getting sick too.
What I care about is people like this, and my wife, and myself, and my children, and your children, who are going to get this.
Some medical researchers now warn we're already in the midst of a new epidemic called Gulf War disease. I'm Charles Rowe.
And I'm Nadine Woodward. At Veterans Administration hospitals around the country, doctors have been trying for years to figure out what is making so many Gulf War veterans so sick. Well, now some of those doctors believe it is a disease, a contagious disease.
Some medical experts even fear it may be a product of germ warfare. So how serious is this disease? As KREM 2's Tom Grant reports, consider what it's done to the veterans.
David Smith was a big man in the Persian Gulf, a 250-pound Marine Corps powerlifting champion.
I hold the Marine Corps record for my weight class too.
But somewhere in the Gulf, somewhere on the way to Kuwait City, he got sick. At first, it just seemed like the flu, but the diarrhea never went away. When he returned to Lewiston, the sickness followed him. Now he had chronic fatigue, difficulty speaking, and forgetfulness.
We fought this for a while.
16 months.
Until finally I found him collapsed. He'd been unable to control his bowels.
Then his wife started coming down with the same symptoms, diarrhea, even chest pains.
I don't like to talk about that.
She broke out the first time we saw her.
Not until this fall at a gathering of several Gulf veterans here in Spokane did David Smith realize just how many other veterans had the same problems. Tony Wilner, a Navy communications specialist, remembers getting sick aboard the ship during the Gulf War.
I got extremely sick on December 15th approximately with nausea and diarrhea. It's the worst I've ever had in my life.
5 years later, it's so bad that many days he's bedridden.
I'm going through pure hell. I'm having all these health problems and chronic pain and chronic fatigue, and the stuff's screwing me up.
That's the track, France, right?
Jeffrey Hutchinson was an Army Ranger who spent most of Desert Storm behind enemy lines. He watched as the engineers destroyed the biggest depot of Iraqi armaments that he'd ever seen. 25 hangar-sized bunkers, each big enough to hold a B-52.
These two buildings that I looked in were filled to the ceiling with artillery rounds, mortar rounds, rockets.
When the bunker went up, smoke rings floated 3 miles into the air.
We came across the border back into Saudi Arabia. A lot of guys had diarrhea. Some guys were throwing up.
Over the next 5 years, Hutchinson would develop chronic fatigue, memory loss, night sweats. Then early this year, Jeffrey Hutchinson suddenly dropped 60 pounds in a 4-month bout of nausea.
Throwing up blood, when I have diarrhea.
The veterans had all been told by doctors that it was probably all in their head.
I had a VA doctor come right up to me in my face and say, "Why are you here? Why are you faking all this?"
Yet their wives and children were showing up with similar symptoms, like memory loss and strange rashes.
On my arm, I got all sorts of bumps. See, they're all around my arm. Once my dad came back from Saudi, they stayed.
Indeed, many found that their most intimate contacts had been changed forever.
Basically, when you had sex, you'd get a burning sensation.
Oh, you
Yeah,
bet.
severe
It'd
burning.
burn a rash
like
in
battery acid.
His semen burns when it touches my skin. It's like an acid is being dropped on me.
They began getting disturbing advice from doctors.
We do not practice unprotected sex any longer. And this came on the recommendation of not just one doctor, but several doctors.
So we have been advised by doctors never to make love again without condoms. We have been advised never to have children, which is very difficult.
They came up with, I'm 5% fertile, but all my sperm has been genetically altered, and it is
5% living was genetically altered and deformed. And would not be able to produce a child.
Why would so many of America's strongest and healthiest young people be struck down? In a minute, we'll take a look at disturbing evidence. It could be germ warfare.
This is a fax about Gulf War disease sent by one medical doctor to another. It begins, "This is not a joke. Many of our military's families have come down with the infectious portion of this disease. And as Crim 2's Tom Grant reports now, it is certainly no joke."
After thousands of American veterans came back from the Persian Gulf with inexplicable health complaints, speculation began about the potential cause of their illnesses. Among other things, they've considered fumes from burning oil wells. They've considered nerve gas released when Iraqi bunkers were destroyed.
Yet the health consequences.
But the President's Committee on Gulf War Illness is still pushing stress as the cause. The Center for Disease Control has found that Gulf War veterans are 3 times more likely to be sick than the general public, but it offers only the most vague diagnosis.
The symptoms clearly fell into a very clear clustering that resembled almost entirely chronic fatigue syndrome.
No doubt stress or chemical exposures could be at the root of the illnesses of many veterans, but experts find those explanations lacking when it comes to explaining why so many people have become sick who never went near the Gulf. According to a survey by a U.S. Senate committee, 77% of spouses and up to 65% of the children of Gulf War illness patients have developed the same or similar symptoms.
I don't have any chemical that would injure any single human being that he could bring home with him and pass on to his wife.
Dr. Edward Hyman is now a physician in New Orleans, but he was trained as a chemist before going to medical school. And when he heard all the talk about a nerve gas as the potential cause of Gulf War illness, he began researching the theories of chemical illness transmission. One theory is that the veterans brought the contamination back with them on their clothes, in letters, or in souvenirs.
We tried cleaning the dirt and stuff out of it. Won't work.
Indeed, veterans did bring back sand and grit in everything. And it smells funny.
See if you can smell it. I mean, it's really weird. I don't know.
There is a smell to it.
And just everything smells like that.
By looking into the sarin nerve gas attack in a Tokyo subway, Hyman tried to check that theory. He collaborated with a European scientist.
He went over there and sent me data, and I told him it did not fit the pattern of the disease Desert Storm.
They have not gotten the right care.
In Los Angeles, Dr. William Baumschweiger has been examining the other prevalent theory, stress. As a Veterans Administration physician with expertise in both psychology and neurology, Dr. Baumschweiger is quite skeptical of the talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Are you going to say they suddenly caught a personality disorder and they're malingering or gold bricking? I don't think so.
Jeffrey Hutchinson flew to Los Angeles to be examined by Dr. Baumschweiger, just as David Smith and Tony Wilner did before him. They were all diagnosed by Baumschweiger not with stress, but with physical symptoms of brain damage.
They all have, if they have real Gulf War disorder, blurry vision, which when you look at it is double vision. That means they have cranial nerve problems.
Dr. Baumschweiger is one of the few doctors in the Veterans Administration who will actually give a diagnosis of Gulf War illness, and he's put it in writing. It's terminal.
Most of these people are really sick, and it's not that hard to treat, and it's not that hard to diagnose. If you're motivated and if you can take the heat from all the people who tell you that you're seeing things and you're hearing things and you're imagining things.
Baumschweiger believes the veterans have suffered serious damage to their immune systems. As this letter from David Smith's doctor shows, they are getting infections like those seen in AIDS patients. Baumschweiger believes low-level chemical exposure may have triggered it.
It is probably more like a family of related disorders precipitated by exposure to low-level sarin.
Yet Baumschweiger says there appears to be a strange virus involved, for scientists are now finding unique viral fragments in the blood of veterans.
This fragment is not found in the regular population.
Because of these viral findings, even those who subscribe to the chemical theory of Gulf War illness, such as Dr. Robert Gary of the Tulane University Medical School, say, and I quote, "If a virus is found to be associated with this disease, significant resources need to be dedicated to learn whether these microbes are contributing to the illnesses of returning veterans and their families, as well as to birth defects in their children after the war."
They should have been asking themselves, what if, a long time ago.
When Gulf War disease, the hidden enemy, continues, we'll introduce you to a doctor who has been asking questions about Gulf War syndrome for 4 years now and just couldn't ignore the symptoms.
The first job is to help the poor souls that are suffering.
When soldiers returned from the Gulf War with a long list of symptoms, one New Orleans doctor took notice. In fact, these symptoms, aching joints, chronic fatigue, memory loss, night sweats, headaches, skin rashes, diarrhea, and depression, sounded like something he had seen before, chronic fatigue syndrome.
It's probably the same causation.
Using a microscopic analysis technique that he developed, Dr. Edward Hyman began looking for certain bacteria in the urine of Gulf War veterans, bacteria that other doctors ignored. He found them. Then he hospitalized his patients at the Thoreau Clinic, and he treated them intravenously with high doses of antibiotics.
Desert Storm, we stopped at 10 servicemen who had been there, and 10 wives and 2 adolescent children. That's 22 total. In the short run, everyone got better.
A few have relapsed, but most of Hyman's patients had dramatic recoveries. Men once bedridden went back to work. A pilot who'd been grounded was allowed to fly again.
I didn't put him back on flight status. I don't know how to make that determination.
Hyman theorizes that soldiers in the Gulf picked up a bacteria, probably one endemic to the region, but one that was fairly isolated until 750,000 Americans dropped in. But he also considers the possibility that American soldiers may have been exposed to biological weapons.
If I were the madman of Baghdad and wanted to wipe out an army 10 times my size, I wouldn't do it with guns and such. Biologicals will do it a hell of a lot better.
Based on his experience with bacterial contagions, he thinks the disease is slowly spreading from soldiers to civilians.
The sick person's coughs or sneezes, and those droplets of water from the sneeze float through the air and somebody else inhales it and they get it.
Hyman is not alone in his ideas. In Pennsylvania, Dr. Catherine Leisure has also been working with sick Gulf War veterans.
I think it's an unknown infectious agent which is causing this syndrome or this illness in multiple different parts of the body of the Persian Gulf veterans.
In Irvine, California, doctors Garth and Nancy Nicholson think they have found that infectious agent. Garth Nicholson is the former chairman of the Department of Tumor Biology at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Research Center. He has published more than 400 scientific papers, including 9 on Gulf War illness.
When our stepdaughter came back from her service in Operation Desert Storm, she slowly came down with an illness that we now know as Gulf War illness. And we found out that many of her colleagues in the 101st Airborne had similar illnesses, and nobody was doing anything about it.
The Nicholsons had also noticed a striking similarity between the complaints of chronic fatigue syndrome and Gulf War illness. And they also had ideas about a suspicious microorganism.
The type of illness has been described in the medical literature.
The bug they suspected is known as Mycoplasma incognitus, which is like a very tiny bacteria without a cell wall. What the Nicholsons have done is compare blood samples from healthy civilians with samples from sick Gulf War veterans. What they found was none of the healthy civilians had mycoplasmal infections, but half of the sick Gulf War veterans did.
We know it's a chronic infection, first because the signs and symptoms are chronic, but also what causes the illness is a microorganism that's a contagion, an airborne contagion, and this would explain why the families slowly come down with the illness.
This mycoplasma is quite dangerous.
It can kill you, and there are medical publications on this.
Upon further analysis, they found something highly unusual in this Gulf War mycoplasma, a gene from the AIDS virus spliced into the mycoplasma's genetic structure.
It has very unusual genes associated with it that normally should not be there. Therefore, we think that it might be a biological weapon that was released during Operation Desert Storm.
Genes from the AIDS virus spliced into a mycoplasma. Germ warfare. That kind of talk has made the Nicholsons' work extremely controversial. Yet there is ample evidence that Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis were experimenting with biological weapons. The U.S. captured many weapons like these capable of delivering biological warheads. A Senate report from 1994 lists 9 pages of pathogens shipped from the U.S. to Iraq, pathogens suitable for use as biological weapons.
You know, that's a good indication that
veterans have documents indicating that such weapons were captured by U.S. forces.
And I also have the NBC logs that shows that they captured chemical and biological agents.
The Nicholsons believe that if American troops were exposed to Iraqi chemicals, they probably got a dose of germs, too.
To say that it's only the chemical that then immunosuppresses is naive.
Or, the Nicholsons say, soldiers may have been infected by U.S. actions.
Soldiers may have received contaminated vaccines, particularly anthrax vaccines.
The military has denied assertions about contaminated vaccines and germ warfare, but veterans are skeptical, primarily because they have caught the government in the past being less than fully truthful. For instance, this document from 1995 says Mycoplasma incognitus is not known to cause disease in man. But Dr. Larry Goss of Walters, Oklahoma, says the government must not be reading its own literature. He has a copy of a workbook used to train military doctors in 1993, a workbook which discusses Mycoplasma fermentans, also known as Mycoplasma incognitus.
The most serious presentation of Mycoplasma fermentans infection is that of a fulminant. That means deadly, rapid, systemic disease that begins as a flu-like illness.
The principal spokesman for the VA seems to know nothing of this.
I don't know about that workbook.
The Pentagon refused all our requests for interviews on this subject and refused to answer our written questions. But Dr. Goss's personal experience tells him that the Nicholsons have got some part of it right.
At the time of Desert Storm, Desert Shield, I was working in the Army hospital out at Fort Sill.
Shortly thereafter, both he and his wife came down with mysterious illnesses. After other treatments failed, he heard what the Nicholsons were suggesting.
I elected to treat my wife empirically with the recommended treatment at the time that it appeared it was effective was doxycycline, and within a week she got better.
Within a week?
Within a week, yes. And I treated myself with it too, and I got better.
Since then, Goss has treated a number of veterans, including Danny Wolf, using a protocol developed by the Nicholsons. Patients are put on repeated 6-week cycles of doxycycline.
Most patients are home free, about 90% of them, after 6 cycles.
It's a relatively inexpensive treatment, but the VA recommends against it.
I've heard from an equally large number of veterans that they tried the doxycycline therapy that had been recommended in letters sent out by Dr. Nicholson, and they've not been helped.
That is particularly troublesome to Goss because he believes this disease is spreading into the general population.
It is contagious. We do know that it is in the perspiration. It's been found in the saliva, certainly in sexual secretions, you know, semen and vaginal secretions. So it can be transmitted sexually. It just stands to reason, since it's in the nuclei of the white cells, that blood transfusions can be a problem.
It is very scary.
The Nicholsons are fearful that because military personnel so often take part in blood drives, that the nation's blood supply is already tainted.
Unfortunately, many of these soldiers have Gulf War illness, and we've detected this microorganism in their blood. This means the blood supply of the United States is contaminated with this chronic infectious agent.
Blood banks say they do screen out people with chronic diseases.
There are specific questions we ask about chronic illness, chronic symptoms that would defer donors from donating.
But because veterans have been told for years that the disease was in their head, not in their blood, doctors believe sick veterans have been donating anyway. Doctors and veterans say the question of the contagious nature of Gulf War illness needs thorough examination now, before it's too late.
I think this Gulf War syndrome is a warning shot. It's a shot across our bow, the bow of our ship of civilization, that we better wake up.
What we've done is that we've opened a Pandora's box here, and we've played dice with God's genes, and it's loose.
Yet what the veterans have seen from their government is a pattern of denial, even of retribution. Consider the cases of Dr. William Baumschweiger and Dr. Kathy Leisure. They made presentations to a national conference on environmental medicine just last October, but they made some controversial statements. Soon Leisure was being fired, and Baumschweiger had his entire department shut down. Now, the VA denies that.
So I would be very surprised if either of those allegations by either Dr. Leisure or Dr. Baumschweiger have any merit at all.
However, veterans are skeptical of a VA that funds research into theories that burning semen is an allergy.
There's a theory that an allergy to human seminal plasma can develop that can cause this burning sensation and even swelling or reddening of the sexual tissues. And we're looking into that further.
And veterans are skeptical of a VA that discredits and refuses to fund scientists like the Nicholsons, like Baumschweiger, like Leisure and Hyman, who have helped them. That's a stark contrast to what sick veterans say about the VA and the Department of Defense.
They're not acknowledging the situation at all. I mean, every veteran we talk to, they are being turned away from the
Ostracized.
VA. They're telling them it's all in their head, and at the same time, they're telling us these things.
And they won't help.
But on the other hand, they're telling us we shouldn't have children. You can't have it both ways. I mean, it's either there or it's not.
Nearly 6 years after the Gulf War, Tony Wilner can no longer hold a job, and his wife is often too tired to attend school.
I ended up having to drop out of school last winter quarter, and it was towards the end of the quarter I just kept getting sicker and sicker. So
Jeffrey Hutchinson is virtually penniless, jobless, and his wife has memory lapses that affect her job too.
I make sandwiches for a living, and I can't even remember how to make sandwiches sometimes.
David Smith and his wife have declared bankruptcy.
It has affected every avenue of our life, every single day of our life.
Torpedoman Joe Passarelli looks at the recurring rash on his 3-year-old daughter, a rash identical to the one that he has suffered ever since the Gulf War, and has only one question.
All I want him to do is to tell me how to stop it. That's all I want from him, is to tell me how to stop it. But don't sit there and tell me it doesn't exist.
A number of veterans have filed a lawsuit against 88 companies which sold Saddam Hussein materials for biological and chemical weapons.
And another group of veterans recently took out a full-page ad in the Washington Times calling for a full investigation of the biological aspects of Gulf War disease.
Our producers this week drove up to the city of Spokane and filmed an interview, several interviews as a matter of fact, but one in particular that we'd like to show right now that they have a video clip of that I think everybody will find interesting. And after that, we're going to open our lines up and continue our phone call section.
Well, I come from a very military family. My mom served in both the Air Force and in the Army Reserves. My father was in the Coast Guard for years. My little brother joined the Air Force right out of high school, and all the time we were growing up, the entire family was very active in Civil Air Patrol doing search and rescue, learning about the military, things like that. So I put it off for the longest. I didn't join until I was 25. And then I decided on the United States Marine Corps because it is the closest thing that America has to the Black Watch, which my Scottish ancestors all were members of the Black Watch, so I wanted to follow in their footsteps. I went to boot camp in Parris Island, South Carolina, September of 1992. Got through that, no problem, had a lot of fun, and my first duty station was in 29 Palms, California. When you first drop into a new base, one of the first things they have you do is menial details to fill up the time to get things done on base until you drop into your first assignment. Our first assignment with the group of people I came in with was to unload the vans from the 1st Tank Scouts that was just returning from the Persian Gulf arena. So we went, we unloaded those. We also checked our supplies out of those that were in the vans, our blankets, our bedding, our jackets, H harnesses, all of the things that are issued to you on a new base, we pulled from those vans because it was the equipment that was available. Nobody thought anything about it. It was dusty, no problem. We shook it out and we went and put it away in our newly assigned barracks rooms. I then started tech school and got sick. I reported to sick call, I believe like the 5th or 6th of January. Had all of a sudden serious bronchitis, very bad sinusitis infection, and was just generally not feeling well. They gave me antibiotics, told me to spend 2 days in my room. When it did not get better, went back in, and that started a cycle. I was into the base sick call at least once a week for the remainder of my time at 29 Palms. Bronchitis was constant. We then discovered that I was not retaining fluids. Even though I was drinking a gallon of water a day, that wasn't enough. They had me start drinking Gatorade, more water. My voice started going within the first 3 months. I got to where I am now. I used to have a very nice, clear, feminine, first soprano voice. I sang first soprano in choir, did a lot of professional singing, was also still competing in Scottish Highland dancing, which is very physical. As part of being sick, I hit a point where I could not run anymore. I'd run maybe 20 feet, start having problems breathing, my eyes would water, my nose would run, and all this time the doctors were saying, well, you're allergic to the desert. We can tell you've got this strong Scottish background, the Scottish genetics are in you, and you weren't meant to be out in the desert, you've just got it really bad. I had one weekend where I'd gotten up Saturday morning, I walked the 1/4 mile with 2 of my friends down to the PX, bought a big thick comforter because I was freezing all the time, got back up to the room, wrapped up in that comforter, and passed out for 18 hours. The guys that were there stayed there with me, watched over me. One of them, a very young Lance Corporal, was checking me every 15 minutes to make sure I didn't stop breathing. They didn't even think about trying to get me to the hospital, anything. They were scared to death. These are 18-year-old kids. And I've since found out that in all probability that I probably should have died at that point. One of the symptoms in the Gulf War syndrome is this very high fever, and that's where a majority of the first casualties are coming from, is people don't make it through that first really bad sickness.